Hello, welcome to Growth Track. This is session 4 of Old Testament Survey. If you're taking this class for college credit, you can go to churchoftheheartland.com and go to Growth Track, and it will explain what you need to do for this particular class, Old Testament. So we were just talking about Moses in the book of Exodus, and Moses is now becoming an adult, and he's being stirred by the cruelty that happened to his fellow Israelites. So, and we were talking a little bit about social justice. Social justice truly does stir our hearts, doesn't it? And a lot of times it rouses us to action. Moses suddenly felt compelled to overthrow the brutality against his people. So social issues today that we're facing, they are many. You may at some point in time, it might become one of your burdens. You might be called to be just a catalyst in making positive change in some of those areas. There is a horrendous sex trafficking issue. Gosh, when COVID hit, I read more, and I was having a hard time sleeping at night, and it was a lot of prayer and just, praying like, God, what do we do? Lord, raise up, expose the deeds of darkness, rescue these precious children and people that are caught up in some of the things that are happening. It could be abortion. It could be to your heart, maybe even you have been in a position where you have had an abortion. A friend of mine I just talked to is in that position, and she's still healing, and it's years later, and she's just seeking God. How do you want to use me, Lord? How do you want to use me and my pain and the pain of what I've suffered through myself personally? So we may be called to some of those different burdens of social justice. And we have to ask ourselves, can we really make a difference? We can make a difference. We can make a difference. But in and of ourselves, I think we can make a bigger difference if we engage in a better strategy. So social reform requires the hand of God. I truly believe that. Prayer and seeking God. Then finding strategies to make a lasting difference. And I think we don't want to be afraid to become involved if the Lord lays things on our hearts, but we want to do it with wisdom and the heart of God. Because when people make decisions, and sometimes they regret those decisions. People get pulled into things, and later they're wounded, they're broken. But we want to extend the solutions that the Lord offers, not just humanistic solutions. We want people to know that they are loved and they are important to God no matter what choices they have made. And anyhow, so there are ways to go about it that are going to be more effective and less destructive. So Moses, after he realized the next day that somebody saw him kill this Egyptian, he knew he had to flee. So he ran. He ran. Okay, he ran away from his problem. He ran away from his decision. He was afraid of the consequences he was afraid that Pharaoh would kill him when he found out. He started a new life and just started living life, started going about his business. He met a wife, he got married, started a family, was just going about his life, probably trying to be a good man in the middle of nowhere in Midian. And then he had a suddenly. He had a suddenly with God. A suddenly is when you're just kind of going about your routine, as we just call them suddenlies. You're going about your own routine. You're trying to be faithful. You're serving God. And suddenly something happens where things are about to change and God intervenes in your life. So Moses was out and he sees this bush lit up, and he gets closer and it's on fire, but it's not burning. And he's like really fascinated, so he goes closer. And he suddenly is going to be called by God to do something that's way bigger than himself. And we have to remember, we have our own set of suddenlies. Suddenly, you could just be going through your life serving God, loving your family, trying to be faithful, and then suddenly you're caught and God is asking you to do something that is bigger than yourself. Those suddenlies can be, they can shake you up a little bit. So Moses received his call for the next season of his life in that divine encounter with God through that burning bush. Exodus 3:2. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from within a bush. God called him from within the bush. Moses. Whew. And Moses said, Here I am. And God speaks to him and says, I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. God called Moses and told him, I am sending you. I'm sending you, Moses, to go confront the most powerful man. The most powerful man that he did have a history with, right? So can you imagine Moses' response? And the Bible does record it like, wait just a minute, Lord. I'm relatively certain you're making a mistake. I know who I am. I know who he is. Not a good choice. I stutter. I clam up. My speech is less than eloquent. He basically told God, you're making a big mistake. And we can do the same thing, can't we? We can do the same thing. When the Lord asks us to do things, sometimes we just lay before him our fear and our insecurities. But Lord, you know about my past sin. I can't do that. You know what I've done in my past. My family knows what I've done. I can't do that. Lord, you know I'm too old. I'm not the right size. I'm not the right stature, right? I'm not a size 0. Matters nothing to God. He doesn't care how old you are. He doesn't care your body shape. That is an American. Okay, God is not making a mistake. And he's not making a mistake when he calls us. Right? But a lot of times we lay out our flaws just like Moses did. And we have to run to God for what we need when he calls us to something bigger than ourselves. We lay out our insecurities, but God still chooses us, as he chose Moses. God was calling Moses to do something much bigger than his natural ability would allow. He needed God, and God faithfully empowered the rescue of his people through a surrendered man. He eventually just said, yes, okay, Lord, I will do it. So you see, great calls in ministry, like Moses had, require faith in God's great ability, right? In God's great ability. But, I got to throw something at you, so do our everyday calls. Like witnessing to somebody at work. There was a man that I worked with. I taught PE at Rochester Middle School, was there for 36 years. And every time there was an evangelistic message, the Lord prompted me to go to the coworker that I shared a little square cubicle with and tell him about Jesus. And I had all kinds of excuses. Lord, really, can't you send anybody else? He's a manly man. He's a football guy. He's a football hometown man. Brian Hooker is not, I can't see myself. And I would just I would shelf it for probably 2 years. And then finally one day, it was teacher day only, and I'm in the office with him. And I'm like, okay, I'll talk to him. So I just started talking to him about Jesus. Started talking to him about where he was, what his faith was. And I told him about Christ. So once I yielded that, I felt relieved, because every time there was an evangelistic message, he came to my heart and he came to my mind. Basically, God saying, you haven't obeyed me yet. When are you going to obey me? Are you going to talk to him? Cool thing is, my coworker got cancer a couple years ago and he passed away. It was very sad, very shocking, very sudden. And they found journals that Brian Hooker kept, and it journaled his faith journey. Isn't that awesome? So it was such a comfort to me when they said that, he knew Jesus. So it was thank you, Lord, just for the courage to obey. It wasn't my idea, I guarantee it. His idea, but then to just see the fruit that he's in heaven. So sometimes we need to remember we need faith in God's great ability, not in our great ability. You guys who are parents, you need God's great ability to raise your children, to raise teenagers. To raise teenagers. It's a tough time for them and you. You need faith in God's ability to help you through Bible college, right? To growth track. So life as a believer requires faith in God's great abilities and his faithfulness. So just be encouraged that God knows who you are. He knows your flaws, he knows your weaknesses, and he wants you anyhow. He wants to use us. What a privilege, what an honor, what a blessing. He wants to use us as flawed as we are. So look around the room for just a second. Every person in here is flawed. Every person in here has insecurities. Some people just say yes to God. Just be the people that say yes. Okay, God, it's not about me. It's not about me. It's about you. And it's about assignments you give us. And he calls us, he doesn't want us to be comfortable. Get that out of your mind. Not comfortable. He wants to come close to us, even if he knows how flawed we are. He wants you to personally experience his love, his goodness, his mercy, and his nature. We are changed in God's presence, aren't we? When we spend time with God, we're changed in his presence. We become Christ-like. We become Christ-like as we allow the power of the Holy Spirit to transform our lives. Then, the change in us is a powerful witness to those around us. I'm telling you, if people one season of my life would be very surprised to know where I am now. My college years, friends, but maybe they've changed too. Hopefully there's been a great transformation in their life too. But sometimes, doesn't it surprise you sometimes, that God empowers you to do things that are way beyond yourself? He's faithful. Excuse me. So God called Moses once again to confront the most powerful, influential man in Egypt to release free slave labor. He was afraid of their numbers, but it was great for their economy, right? He had to keep them alive, barely, and they built Egypt. So one of the things to remember too about Moses, he did not start out as one of the most beloved leaders of the nation of Israel. He started out impulsive and insecure. Isn't it cool to know God can transform people? Right? We are not the same today as we were 2 years ago. The transformation process continues until we take our last breath. And who knows, heaven's going to be amazing. Like, who knows what's going to happen up there? It's going to be great. I don't know if we keep transforming and changing, but we get to know more of God, and that in and of itself is amazing. Year by year, you guys, we get to know God more. We get to see how awesome He is, how He rescues people. So Moses' willingness to say yes to God and his willingness to obey God's directive day after day, month after month, year after year, positioned Moses to be molded by the Master's hand. That's what He wants of us. To say yes to God day after day, month after month, year after year. Exodus 3. This is just a powerful concept in this part of Scripture that kind of can put things in perspective for us. It is not about Moses and his ability, just like it's not about us and our ability. God plus anything is supernatural. Right? God reassures Moses and reveals how He wants His children to know Him. So Moses, when he was still a little nervous about this next assignment, God's given him instructions of what He wants him to do. And Moses said, well, what if they ask me your name? What am I supposed to say? And in 3:13, well, let's go to 3:14. Excuse me. God says to Moses, tell them I am who I am. That is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am. Oh, that is a powerful, powerful, powerful reflection of God's nature. This name expresses His character as the dependable and faithful God who desires the full trust of His people. I am. Exodus 3:20. So he's going to tell Moses, you're about to combine yourself with me, and it's about to get supernatural here. 3:20 says, so I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I will perform among them. After that, He will let you go. God is about to do mighty miraculous signs to display His power, authority, and superiority to the Egyptian gods. There was a lot of pagan worship in Egypt. They had a god for a lot of things. And it was characterized by a complex set of polytheism. They had local deities. They had nature deities worshipped by people. Some were associated with fertility, agriculture, protection, virtually every aspect of life. So, the 10 plagues of Egypt were direct hits to the gods of the day. The 10 plagues were strategic. They weren't just pulled out of it wasn't just a haphazard decision by God. When that plague came, it confronted an Egyptian deity. Why did those plagues come? They demonstrated the supremacy of Yahweh, Israel's God, the God of Israel. And the plagues came to bring freedom to the Hebrew people who were enslaved in brutal slavery. So, the 10 plagues, the river turned to blood, the Nile River turned to blood, frogs overran the countryside, lice infested the people and animals, flies covered the land. Every time God would send Moses to Pharaoh and say, all we want to do is go into the wilderness for 3 days and worship God. God wants his people. He's inviting us to worship him. And if you do not let us go and worship God, you will have this consequence. And Pharaoh rejected Moses' request to let the Israelites worship God. So one plague after another came. Moses would come, Pharaoh would say no. Pharaoh would be distressed by the plague. He'd call Moses back. Moses would come back and say, okay, I'll let you guys go. And then he would back out on it. So there were boils, sores, hail that destroyed the crops and vegetation, locusts that covered the land and destroyed the remaining vegetation. Darkness, the 9th plague was darkness covering Egypt for 3 days. No light, except when you went to Goshen in Egypt. None of these plagues hit God's people. They had to see, both the Israelites and the Egyptians, that God was God. Yahweh was God. He was the supreme God. And the final most deadly plague came when Pharaoh's heart was hardened and he refused to let the Israelites go. Exodus 12:12. On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down. This is brutal. Whew. This would, if you really think about it, we read about it, but if you think about, this is a brutal consequence. We'll strike down every firstborn. I'll pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn, both male and animal, both men and animals, And I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. That's what this was about. I am the Lord. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. This was the Passover. This was the Passover. Whew. And so it happened. All the firstborn died. And then the Egyptians wanted the Israelites gone. They wanted them gone. They couldn't get rid of them fast enough. They're grieving. There's such loss. Upon Israelites' exit from Egypt, God made his tangible, powerful presence known to Israel. Okay? They were going to get to know God. They were going to get to trust God. They were going to learn to walk with God. Exodus 14:5, though, said, when the king of Egypt, they started to exit. Okay, they left. They left Egypt. The Egyptians, they gave the Israelites some belongings. They gave them jewelry. They set them up for their exit. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their mind. Imagine that. So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. They chased them to the Red Sea, and God delivered them in a supernatural rescue plan. So at this moment in time, Egypt could have totally annihilated Israel. And they were positioned for God's glory to be revealed. Before them was the Egypt chasing them down with vengeance and anger, and behind them was the Red Sea, right? There was no way out. No way out of this circumstance. Think about it. No natural way out of the circumstance but God. The enemy thought he won. God's people were backed in the corner. There was no place to go. They literally had no chance of escape. But God. And God did it for them, and he's still doing it today, right? Our God still makes a way, you guys, when there is no way. He makes a way when there seems to be no way. He did it for Egypt. He did it in Egypt. He did it for the Israelites in this moment in time. And he split the Red Sea open, and his people marched through the Red Sea to safety. Not only did he make a way where there was no way, the waters caved in as Egypt followed them in. They thought they were going to be able to go to, and judgment came, and they drowned. The waters caved in as they were crossing the Red Sea. He defeated their oppressors. So, throughout some other major events that happened in Exodus, God showed himself supernaturally. They're in the desert. They cross the Red Sea, and the enemies are drowned. They walk out. They worship God. They worship God. They start singing. They start praising. They start, thanking Yahweh for his supernatural intervention, as we should do. Right? Shouldn't we do that too? When you're praying, when you're believing, when you're trusting God, when you're asking him for things, and that he makes that supernatural way, he makes a way, he answers our prayer. Don't forget to thank him. Don't forget to worship him. Don't forget to, so you might have 15 other things that you've got to face. Thank him for the thing that he just did. Right? Keep a grateful heart. It'll change your life. Guaranteed. If you're mad and angry all the time, that is the climate you set in your life, in your home, in your relationships. If you keep a grateful heart to God, it gives him glory. It does. So, 3 days later, they were hungry. They're in the middle of nowhere. God took them on an unfamiliar route. Where are we? What are we going to eat? We got a lot of people here. Who's going to feed us? We're starving. We're going to die in the desert. They started grumbling. And that the supernatural provision of God began. He rained down food, and he told them, it began the season of discipline. He rained down supernatural food called manna. He fed them. How else were they going to eat, right? 2-3 million people. Every day they were to go and get what their family needed, and it was always a perfect amount. He told them, don't store up, don't take enough for the next day. Trust me for today. It got moldy and mildew, or like it was nasty if they tried to take extra. So they learned to do what? Trust God. Every day. He provided today. We can really learn a lesson from that. Because sometimes like you want to be this step, this step, this step, this step, and you want to walk it out. You really want to know, you want the plan laid out. And sometimes God makes, I have friends that are really great planners. I don't know why God has to he's kind of rough on them. You get to know what's happening today, not tomorrow. And then the next day. When the next day comes, I'll let you know. It's kind of cool. They have some pretty crazy cool stories, but it's that is God. Some other major events of Exodus. The priesthood came into being. God gave a new system of worship in Exodus. There were priests. The tribe of Levi was selected as the tribe that was going to be like the pastors, so to speak. Okay, that what we compare it to. They were going to be the priests. They were going to offer the sacrifices, and those are going to be. I'll talk about those the next time we get together. That's in the book of Leviticus. So, God showed himself supernaturally. In the daytime, it was hot, so he covered them with a cloud. In the nighttime, it was cold and they couldn't see, so he was a pillar of fire. Isn't that crazy? They got to see God's presence. He established a tent of meeting where Moses and the leaders would go to meet with them. So they would go into the tent of meeting. God would give instructions. And in Exodus, God gives the 10 commandments. Okay, Moses goes up to spend time with God. He's in God's presence. And then while he's gone for 40 days and they blow it, they revert right back to paganism. Go melt that gold and form some gods and let those be our gods. Those golden calves be our gods. Some people lost their lives on that day, okay? And the Levites executed judgment. Go kill them, wipe them out. It was tough. Those were tough times. But some other things that happened. The 10 Commandments were given. The Ark of the Covenant was created. God gave instructions for the Ark of the Covenant. That represented the presence of God. God was going to teach them how they were to worship Him, how they were to come before Him. And that Ark of the Covenant represented God's presence. So, God established authority and reestablished godly authority. So, He also gave, I'm going to end up on this, He also gave in the book of Exodus instructions for the first traveling church, which was called the tabernacle. So He gave specific instructions on how to design the tabernacle, how to build it, and they were going to learn how to worship their God. So we will continue on in the book of Leviticus next time we are together. Next week there is a vacation. So we'll see you back again the following week.